Gaming in the 90s was a completely different beast than the one we know today. What once were consoles filled with a variety of action-adventure platformers became ones that had to fit a more widely applicable audience. But I'm not here to rant about modern gaming, so let's just rewind a bit. It's the early to mid 90s. Nintendo was trying to innovate on their consoles in their fight against Sega. So in collaboration with British developer Rareware, whom I'll refer to as Rero for the rest of the video, they put out Donkey Kong Country. With some of the most advanced graphics we'd ever seen at the time, it's no surprise Nintendo and Rare would form a pretty close bond and continue to pump out hits on the Super Nintendo and eventually the Nintendo 64. The N64, a pretty good console, man. We got some of the most critically acclaimed games ever on it, many of which being 3D platformers, the new hit genre established by Nintendo themselves. Rare would release Banjo-Kazooie on the console, probably the most popular of theirs, but this also includes a couple of others. Suffice to say, Rare had found their sweet spot and relentlessly output their own 3D platformers. In 1997, Rare was developing their newest one, Conker's Quest, later renamed to 12 Tales Conker 64. He also eventually appeared in Diddy Kong Racing as a playable racer, and even got his own sister Game Boy title in 1999, just as many console games at the time had, but I'm getting a bit ahead of myself here. While it seems to be shaping up into another hit with kids, a new century was coming upon the industry, with critics growing tired of the same cookie-cutter kiddie platformer games on the N64. Wanting to differentiate the game, and compete with an emerging mature audience, Rare reworked the game into Conker's Bad Fur Day, a much more mature, and yet at the same time, much more immature game.
Stupid logo! Yeah, that's better. You can get it. Marvelous.
Revealed at E3 2000, Conker's Bad Fur Day was shown off for the first time ever, making the audience laugh at how stupid the game's humor was, while also providing a bar area where they could drink, play the game's multiplayer mode, and receive Conker-themed condoms. No, that's not a joke. This is a real thing that actually happened. Honestly, very amusing and one of my favorite pieces of video game trivia. Anyway, the game would release a year later in 2001 to great reviews, but very poor sales numbers, likely due to not only the game's M rating, but also because the GameCube was right around the corner. Conker's Bad Fur Day would end up being one of Rare's last games with Nintendo before they were bought up by Microsoft the following year, a very controversial decision in the video game industry, to say the very least, and in a way serving as symbolism for the death of the cutesy 3D platformer game. Let's take a look at why this game is so representative of the end of an era, along with its mature immaturity. So the game starts off with a prologue in which Conker is the king of all the land. However, this is actually taking place after the game's events, so the whole game is what takes place in that single day beforehand. The game is called Conker's Bad Fur Day after all, pretty creative. This is also our introduction to the copious amounts of movie references throughout the game. A Clockwork Orange, Jaws, Saving Private Ryan, The Matrix, pretty entertaining stuff. After the prologue, we see that Conker's out pretty late at a bar, and he leaves a voicemail for his girlfriend Barry, informing her that he'll be home a bit late. She saw a pretty stark redesign following the game's change in direction, now being gray and much taller than Conker. Anyway, he has a bit too much to drink, vomiting by this dude outside. Oh yeah, important to note, this game is actually fully voice acted, a very new thing at the time, and while we did see other games take a jab at it, they were more often than not on hardware that used discs like the PlayStation, which could hold a lot more storage than an N64 cartridge. Yeah, the voices are pretty compressed to fit on it, but the range of the characters is pretty incredible considering they're all voiced by a whopping 2 people, a guy and a girl. Rare's Britishness really shows in this game as well, and I love the flair it gives the characters' voices and language.
Twatting shite!
Conker goes the wrong way when trying to get home, as we're introduced to the main villain of the game, the Panther King. His problem is, well, he's got this end table with a broken leg, and after his milk falls off of it, he's pissed and has his own personal scientists come up with a solution, only for him to come with the news that the missing gap in the leg would perfectly fit a red squirrel. Yeah, the game's plot is very stupid, which is fitting, and the stupidity is not limited to just these two. Almost everyone you come across is a dumbass or a flat-out jerk, swearing at you quite a bit actually, asking you to do tasks for them in exchange for cash. Not all of them are bad though, like Conker's friend Rodent.
What a great guy. Idiot.
Conker himself, though, is a great character. He's forced to navigate through each area and deal with everyone's vulgar stupidity. He's like a frat boy thrust into a world of people with negative IQs. While there are movie references at some points, as stated earlier, the entire game gives me Alice in Wonderland vibes. On surface level, it may be difficult to see, but Conker's pretty much found himself in the exact same situation. It's pretty impressive just how many pieces of media Conker's Bad Fur Day pulls at to form a cohesive and fun plot. The whole game feels ahead of its time in general. I mean, look at the graphics. These areas may not look next gen due to the low polygon count, but damn does this game look beautiful for the N64. It's close, but I'd say this is definitely the best looking game on the entire console. It's not even just the graphics, it's the attention to detail. Take a look at how many idle animations Conker has. Even my favorite games ever don't have nearly as much effort put into theirs.
Hello? I think he's died. Are you dead? Hello? Hey, what are you doing? Stop doing that! You're gonna go blind!
In fact, I think my favorite thing about this game, aside from the humor, is definitely the world. Each area is connected to the others in some way, shape, or form. You can even see them all on top of this mountain here. One area can finish up and you'll loop back to another, which is really awesome to me. It's such a small thing, but I really appreciate it. I also really enjoy re-exploring some older areas about 2/3 through the game after it turns night. Yeah, a game like Banjo may have high attention to detail in its level-by-level gameplay, but it's commendable how Conker can squeeze these contrasting areas together so smoothly. In short, this game is a joy to look at to this very day. From the animations to the fun and fresh locales, you won't grow even a bit tired in terms of visual appeal. And the soundtrack, man, it adds even more depth to the world with this distinct energy. Beanland is one of Rare's greatest composers, working on Rare's games of old and even new, like Sea of Thieves. While I think I slightly prefer Grant Kirkhope's musical direction in the Banjo-Kazooie games, Beanland goes a long way in Bad Fur Day with just how catchy the main theme is. And yeah, the main theme can be heard in little snippets over and over again throughout the game, but each variation is just so damn distinct. Of course, we've got the main one, the buzzing bee one, the barn one with its catchy ass banjo, and even a whistling variant that can be heard during one of Conker's idle animations in which he sits down to whistle it himself, further adding to this game's attention to detail. Aside from the main theme, other standouts include the Bats Tower theme, the hoverboard racing theme, and of course the theme that plays in the club. Look at those dance moves, man. So yeah, overall the music's pretty good. But rather than visual or audio appeal, let's discuss mechanical appeal. That's right, gameplay. Now, this is where Conker's Bad Fur Day starts to falter for me a little. You know, it starts off simple enough: high jumps, the helicopter hover, and these pads that allow you to press B for a context-sensitive item to help you progress. And these are pretty funny, honestly. Conker is honestly really fun to control, and I find that I actually prefer his snappier feel over Banjo's more slow-paced one. However, the first problems lie within the repetitive fetch quest nature of many of the missions. Now, in the 3D platformer realm, this is nothing new. We've had plenty of fetch quest missions in preceding platformers in the 90s, but they were honestly much fewer and further between there. Conker's Bad Fur Day has some fun platforming sections here and there, yeah, but most eventually devolve into these sorts of errands in which you've got to get 3 of a thing that may or may not culminate into a boss fight in which you hit him another 3 times. The scenarios themselves conveyed through the cutscenes are definitely the best parts of the game. Watching the bicker is fun, but the gameplay feels lackluster by comparison. It's very, and I mean very, varied, which on paper is a good thing. It does execute some things pretty well, but then you get drunk at this club and you have to piss on these rock people. You heard that correctly, but anyway, the issue is if they're not close enough to these holes, you're out of luck. They're gonna rightfully turn around and beat your ass. And listen, Conker can piss far, man. There's no excuse here. The stream just has no effect at a certain distance. I also noticed this here. My shotgun just couldn't quite headshot these zombies if they were too far away. So, to sum it up, the platforming is pretty fun, and the other stuff is hit or miss. We've got some bullshit here and there. This game's honestly really comparable to the first Metal Gear Solid for me, with great cutscenes, but kinda tedious gameplay at times. That's not to say everything is amiss though, some sections are pretty enjoyable. The boss fights are a real highlight. Yeah, they've got similar structure as I said, but they're also memorably hilarious and decently fun as well. Whether you're crushing some dude's balls with cinder blocks or fighting a giant pile of singing shit, opera to be exact, you'll be having a fun time with most of the bosses. But seriously, backing up a bit, the Great Mighty Pooh boss is one of the highlights of the game for me. Throwing the toilet paper to blow up his balls of shit and then throwing it in his mouth to deal damage is really creative, and the song itself is shockingly catchy. Conker's Bad Fur Day may not be as consistent in its gameplay as its contemporaries, but the amount of other styles it can hit with a surprising decency is pretty impressive. And though a little more polish would have gone a long way, I can excuse some of the clunkier moments since it is an N64 game. I feel that we should go over the chapters in order as well, so let's do that. Starting off, we've got the Hungover chapter, serving as a pretty good introduction to the game. Conker takes some aspirin, I think, and immediately sobers up. How convenient. Allowing for us to take him up this cliffside. There's some pretty good first level game design here with the negated fall damage down in the water, and I find it pretty cool how the game loops itself back around here during the final act of the game. The Windy chapter is essentially your standard first grass level foray in Bad Fur Day. Whereas the Hungover chapter serves as a prologue, Windy introduces some higher stakes with this beehive retrieval mission, followed by... There's also this part where you need to get these cows to have diarrhea, so you can make balls of shit. Yeah, this game's got cussing and blood, but it's not complete without some childish humor too, which I can appreciate to a degree. The Barn Boys chapter is next, with one too many fetch quest missions for my liking, but it's alright. Some pretty fun characters here, and a decent boss fight. The Bats Tower chapter is one of my favorites, with some fun platforming, I'm a pretty big fan of these ropes here, and some underwater segments, which aren't too bad honestly. I should also mention that Conker's swimming controls are actually pretty good, beating out most of his contemporaries, though I believe Spyro's got the better swimming controls of the 5th gen. Damn, Insomniac's always been nailing the swimming controls, huh? The fight against the Great Mighty Pooh gets its own chapter called Sluprano. Haha, and I honestly think it's worthy for one, being a much grander boss in the game than even the final one, which is kind of hilarious. Following all those, we transition into what I consider to be the distinct latter half of the game, with the Ooga Booga chapter, as Conker finds himself in an underground civilization filled with cavemen and dinosaurs. I find it sorta inconsistent with its sporadic moments of annoyance, but nonetheless, it's just fine overall. I think the little hat that Conker wears throughout some of it is honestly kinda cute. The Spooky chapter. Oh, the Spooky chapter. Definitely the lowest point of the game by a pretty large margin for me. It starts off fine enough after getting a shotgun and going to town in the graveyard, but once you get into this damn mansion, everything goes downhill. First of all, we have this section where you turn into a bat and shit on people before bringing them to this grinder. Simple enough, and it's not too difficult or anything, it's just plain boring. After that, we have the most drawn out part of the game, that being the escape from the mansion, in which you need to bring 3 keys to the front door. The problem is, once you pick up a key, you can't use your shotgun again, so if you didn't clear out the big ass rooms beforehand, you're out of luck. It's over once you learn the layout of the mansion, but damn is this part convoluted and annoying. Overall, a pretty mediocre chapter. Next up is the It's War chapter, which I do quite like. The laser aim on the shotgun before was fine, I guess, but it is really nice to have a proper reticle with these guns. There's some clunky moments like this boring ass turret section, but the tenseness of this chapter, coupled with the higher stakes, makes it a really fun time for me. I love these ominous sections, roaming the cramped, laser-filled hallways, and cautiously peeking at each corner. Plus, we can't forget about this elevator scene.
Surely it can't get any worse than that.
Some of these cutscenes are intense as hell too, specifically the reference to the Saving Private Ryan beach scene, with one of the animators even reporting that she had nightmares while animating it. And we can't forget about this cutscene that Nintendo requested to be removed from the game, of this squirrel being experimented on. I distinctly remember watching this on YouTube as a kid and being mildly traumatized. And finally, the game ends off on the Heist chapter, a pretty fun Matrix parody. I'm gonna get into spoilers real quick with the ending, so skip to this timestamp to avoid them. Once Conker infiltrates this vault and becomes a millionaire, it's then revealed that this was merely to lure him here. Barry is then shot dead right in front of his eyes. While he may have all the money he's ever wanted, one of his goals, he's now unable to achieve his goal of going home, because his girlfriend was really his only home. He doesn't really have any other family that I'm aware of. The Panther King is just about ready to snatch up Conker for his own benefit, when suddenly we get this scene straight out of Alien, as it's revealed this was the professor's doing. Although he's sucked out into the vacuum of space, so he got what he deserved. We then have the final boss against the alien. Look familiar? The only difference is that this time around you have to gradually increase your speed or else it won't work. It works pretty clunkily. Honestly, I love these animations for the suit when you're punching the alien, but this final boss is honestly pretty mediocre. Conker's Bad Fur Day has a surprisingly deep ending. With his decisions throughout the course of the game, he's ended up as the Panther King's replacement, coming full circle from the prologue. I love this little callback to what Rodent said, too.
Yes, king! Who'd have thought that? Who'd have thought that? King of all the land. Who'd have thought that?
Conker realizes the impact of his actions. Choosing money and fame over his family and home is what got him to the status of king, perhaps the very last thing he wants to be. He just wants to go back home happily again, but he can't. So, he goes back to his regular old drinking self, as we see in the post-credits scene. This time, however, he walks the correct way going home, serving as symbolism for Conker's growth as a character. The game's ending was actually originally going to take a much darker direction, as Rero wanted to have Conker shoot himself dead in the bar's bathroom. Jeez. It's no surprise that Nintendo revoked this. Now, was Conker's character arc really that groundbreaking for the time? No, it's nothing new either. It boils down to a family versus money sort of lesson, but I can appreciate how a game so utterly stupid can have some type of meaningful message at the end. Conker's Bad Fur Day, as a game, is alright. There's nothing here to write home about. I enjoy the platforming and boss fights, and sometimes even some shooter gameplay, but it is undeniable there are some bumpier points along the way that bring down the experience a bit for me. However, that doesn't mean the game lacks character. In fact, that's the game's strong suit. It absolutely oozes character, charm, and absolute hilarity. That's what really drew me into the game anyway. What may be an alright game is also a hilarious slapstick adventure. In fact, I purposefully avoided talking about the game's specific jokes in this video to allow for you guys to experience them yourselves if you wanted to. While far from perfect in many ways, Conker's Bad Fur Day is a game that's had a sizable impact on my life. I still recommend it to fans of this era of gaming. and I think it acts as the perfect conclusion to the 5th generation of gaming, the Nintendo 64, and of course, the 3D platformer. Thank you guys so much for watching, hopefully you enjoyed the video. Thankfully, it was a lot easier to get out than the last one. What are your thoughts on Conker's Bad Fur Day, or this video even? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed it, go ahead and leave a like on the video as well. Both of those things help a lot more than you'd think. Of course, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications as well. I'll try my best to get out another video soon. Hopefully I'll see you all again soon. Bye.